I tend to think it was. Last year they won with a 98, and that was the highest ever, so 98.4 is it right now.
98.4 for Garfield.
Okay, 1985 program, Jeremiah Symphony, Make Our Garden Grow, Candide. Michael Klesch, I want you to talk a little bit about the show concept. You have this amazing story. As I mentioned before, you're a bass drum player in 82, drum major 83, on staff in 84, and somehow you're writing Jeremiah as I think a 23, 24-year-old kid. Just talk to us a little bit about that experience and the show concept that year.
Yeah, you know, when people ask me about that, I have no idea how that happened, honestly. You know, like 1976, I had seen the Blue Devils. 1978, saw the Spirit of Atlanta close to where I grew up in Pennsylvania, and bought my first like set of DCI records. And I used to sit in my bedroom listening to records and think, man, if I could go on tour and like polish the shoes for the Blue Devils, that could be like the coolest thing I ever did with my life. I remember thinking that. And I told Wayne that story one time. He got the biggest kick out of it. But I think it's like right place, right time. Tom Aungst can relate to this. You work hard and operate under a fear of failure. I think that was part of it. And, you know, I think in some ways God had a plan for me. I still don't know fully what that is, but I think along the way that's part of it. But man, I don't know how that all happened. I just know that I was incredibly lucky to be there. So, you know, that particular year, we had tried hiring another brass arranger after Jimmer left and Donnie left. George asked me if I wanted to do it at first, because the year before, I was bringing in stuff to play in the wintertime, like at some of the camps, and I was trying to learn from Jimmer about, you know, how he did what he did. And we went through 2 or 3. Never came up with music for any of the camps. I was bringing in music for the horn line to play. That's where we did the Promise of Living too. I remember Michael Cesario listening to that saying, God, some year we have to do the Promise of Living. And it took decades later for me to be a crown to actually be able to do that one. But like George called me from the DCI meeting, I think he was in Vegas, and he called me and said, look, I'm going to ask you one more time. Do you want to write the book? And I was so ticked off at that point that I was like, yes, I'll do that, because I know Jimmer can help me. If I get in trouble, I know he's going to give me, you know, whatever he can do to help. And I just wanted the horn line to have something, you know. I don't know how the Jeremiah came up. I know that we went, like the staff people, we went to see the New York Philharmonic play it. It was awesome. Like, we have to do this. We heard them do Copland's Third too back then in the day. But it's like we knew we just wanted to do this large work. And it was something, you know, that kind of the next step for Garfield to do uncharted territory, try to do things that nobody else was doing. And we had been doing large works. We did Bernstein's Mass. We did West Side Story. You know, now we're doing a Bernstein Symphony. So that part of it was kind of a no-brainer. Michael Cesario, that a lot of you had kind of, you know, referred to tonight, he was like, we're going to do this, you know, because we're going to give them Garden Grow. You know, the audience will give us the license to do this because we'll give them Garden Grow and we'll give them Candide, and they'll, you know, they'll let us back in. But you still heard the guy yell boring on the finals recording, you know, for Jeremiah. But I think the best thing that I had going for me was that I didn't really know what I was doing. You know, I knew the mechanics. I had written stuff in high school because our band director got us to do that. Westchester, where I went to school, was a very big student-run marching band. I wrote 9 or 2 for them, like a disaster, complete disaster of a chart. But what you got to like write, you got to hear, and you got to learn from it. So when I was writing for drum corps, I didn't have the baggage that, you know, drum corps writers had up until that point. I just had Jimmer's good example for me to set along the way. So, you know, how that all happened, again, I have no idea. I'm incredibly lucky. I know that, and I look at the people on the screen, like for me, the best thing was I was around just incredible people back then. You know, you think about the people you got to march with, then the people you got to teach with and be around. It's like, it didn't get better than that. It really didn't. So I count my blessings every day that I did that, and Garfield set me up to be doing what I have done for the rest of my life. You know, it's so fortunate to be able to do that.
And a
Michael,
little.
did you face any tension? I'm sorry, Eric. Did
Go
you
ahead.
face any tension from the horn players, you coming in as this drummer who's going to write the horn chart?
Honestly, I didn't, because again, Michael, like people didn't look at you like that back then. I was a Garfield cadet, you know, and like I was the next person to do the next thing, and I worked my ass off to try to make it good. And God, I remember we would go, you know, I would write that music. I would work on that in my apartment. And then we'd get together on a Thursday night with a couple of the horn players that were at school down there or lived down there. And we'd stay up all night. I'd buy a case of beer and we'd stay up all night writing the parts out by hand to go to the camp on Friday. And it's just like, we did what we did. You know, it really, you didn't really think much past that at all.
I have an interesting fun fact. I read this the other day. Leonard Bernstein was 24 when he wrote Jeremiah, and you were 23, right?
Well, I'm no Leonard Bernstein by any stretch of the imagination, but yes, I was 23, and it was, I'll say the fun things about that year were, and again, I don't want to say any specific names, but I was at some critique, you know, getting ready for critique, and we were at the show, and there was a staff that was down below us. You know, I was probably 20 rows up in the stands. And these guys were all like the seniors in the activity, like doing the thing, big drum corps or whatever. And one of them turned around and he pointed up at the stands and he started yelling, "Him? He wrote that?" He just starts screaming at me at the end of the show. And I was like, well, I guess, you know, I don't know. We were the cadets. What can I say?
Switching gears a little bit, I want to talk about the right foot step off. I don't know who is best to talk about that, but I hear rumors over time, and so let's set the record straight.
I'll tell you my understanding, because I was there when that happened. Dancers often start with the right foot, you know, so because we were doing a lot of things that were choreography or based in dance or whatever, it was logical. And again, you were a Garfield cadet, so read the t-shirts. When they zig, we zag, you know, so like everybody started on the left foot, so we're going to start on the right foot. It was, as my memory was really kind of that simple.
I don't know, doing everything in 7/8, it kind of made sense, right? Da 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 da. And you'd end up on one foot, and then you go, okay, start from C, and C just happened to start on the right foot. So you didn't have a choice. You just had to know what foot you were at, given that letter that they were taking your drill from. Am I saying that right?
Yeah, you are. Any odd meter, you're going to be downbeat, right,
on the
downbeat,
opposite.
left foot, downbeat, right foot.
So you just, it just kind of fell into place. You had to know where you were and how to do it.
Well, it was a nightmare early on when learning the drill, because they didn't know that yet, because with all the mixed meters, you didn't know where, is this a right foot step off or left foot step off?
Yeah.
You know, and like I said, they had to kind of know that. I remember learning the drill. It was the first time we tried to play that thing on the move, it was, but that was the deal. There were so many, you never knew. And I can remember, is this right or left foot? And it was so confusing to the kids early on.
So on top of knowing your dot and knowing your music and knowing what letter they were starting from, now you had to add on, is it left or right?
And you're playing Bernstein, and you only had two valves.
Yeah, you had two valves. Exactly.
Yeah. And then when you got to CANDIDE, the tempo just kept going up and up and up.
Kathy, how many reams of paper did you go through getting us new drill sets all the time and new books and new notebooks to, you know, after changes after changes? I remember you coming in constantly with new drill changes. Like, somehow you became the ambassador of new drill sets. You had those tiny little drill books. And how did that come to be for you? How did you end up with that?
I don't know. I don't even remember that. That's funny. I do have the little drill books though.
Yeah. And I remember mid-season, by the time we hit mid-season, probably credit John Vanderkoff, you know, we're watching Brainiac and they're cutting musical sections and he's taping them on top of his drill sets. And now we're figuring out musical phrases and where they line up at the feet and everything. And yeah, instead of going out and partying, now we're on the bus spending 2 hours taping and literally cutting and pasting into our drill sets.
Can anyone tell me, what year did dot books become required? Was that
At
83?
least 83.
That
At
big
least
83.
83.
83.
85 was also the year that the Drumline, it was a renaissance for the Drumline because Aungst aged out and he became the head tech for the Drumline. We had Steve Kiefer and we had Glenn Crosby come over from Blue Devils.
Yeah.
And that, Aungst is here. That was a big shift for the Drumline that year. And we never looked back after that. I don't know if Aungst, you could talk about that.
Yeah, well, I think it was, you had people that could clean it on the move because the drill was crazy. It was doing horn drill with drums on. So
Yeah.
we actually almost won drums.
We did.
We had a breakdown in finals.
The
The whole
Drumline saved us in finals. The beginning of Candide, those 16
I
counts.
think this is where I leave, Tom.
Oh,
No,
no.
Rich.
No.
I will own that forever. And I apologize that that trophy's not in your hand from that night.
It only came up once before.
Rich,
I
you
will
know
say
by
one
that
thing.
time- Go ahead, Tom.
I will say one thing. The drum line, the color guard didn't know when to start. They had me count every time because I was the loudest dude on the field. So they had me count every time the 1, 2, 3 to get them started. And that day, that finals day, the pit was working on something. There was some little change that they did. And it was just weird. We get out there to finals and Rich starts and I would go right with him. I thought that I created that whole thing. I thought that I goofed that whole thing up. And I'm like, man, I counted the downbeat with Rich. Steve Kiefer came back. There's only 2 times, the whole thing of, man, do your best, do your best, do your best. Every time I walked on the field, that's what I wanted to do. When I walked off the field in Whitewater, I felt like I didn't do my best when I ended up on my back. And when we walked off the field that night at finals, I thought that I caused it all. And it wasn't until we got back later and we were at Janesville at the high school and Steve Kiefer came up to me and he goes, hey man, the Drumline hated when you counted, but they loved you tonight because that's what they actually picked up on and went. And I went, really? So that was a crazy night. And Rich, I still remember seeing the look in your eyes because you looked at me and I was like, crazy night.
Weren't we banned from that school and that town after we got back championships?
Something to do with a golf cart.
I remember a golf cart trying to get
Yes.
through a door, which didn't fit. I remember that.
Yeah, something with a golf cart.
Yes, well, Tom, compliments to you. You had the Cymbeline doing 16th note runs at 184, 192. So how we did, I don't even know how we did that, but we did it. So thank you.
The thing about that too is that, by that time of the way we had progressed from the years, we were told to keep your eyes on Rich, keep your eyes on Rich. And I was in the quad line and we were on the 50 and I saw Rich start the song and then he did this, no. And he restarted it and we were right with him. Some other sections in the drum line were not. Well, I didn't really understand how that happened if everybody was watching.
Well,
It
so
was just weird.
So that day at the final practice, it put in all these different sounds because it's very comedic. And Rich was told there was going to be this whistle or this duck call or something he's going to count to 16. And I remember going up, I'm like, I don't think this is going to work. I think he just goes no matter what. Because we just did it that day. And actually, if you remember practice, we did it and we actually screwed it up. Like it was, I'm like, and I was just a young tech and whatever. And I said, oh boy, we're in trouble here. And so it was when that whistle goes or whatever that sound was, you're supposed to conduct. And I think that's what happened, right? It wasn't there. And there was you went and then you went, wait, where's that whistle or where's that sound? And then you went again.
I couldn't hear the sound. And I should never, that was one of those things that you should not put anything in the day of finals and that you can't rep. And, trying to do what you're supposed to do. It's like, I didn't hear it. And I just double pumped and it was a mistake. And
there were very few judges that made any remark about it. That was a thing. We're listening to tapes. And the guys upstairs, nobody said a thing. I guess the drum guys on the field did,
but you know what, Shorty? All you have to do is look at every cadet eye when we circled up at the end.
Yeah.
I mean, that was an awful, I didn't want to look. I mean, just everybody looked at me like, if we lose because of you, we're killing you.
No.
That's how I took that. And
despite all of that, it still turned out okay.
Candide was amazing.
Yeah.
Candide was amazing.
It did.
I actually did hear the GE tape, and there was only one comment that was made on that tape, and they said, "Oh, they did something different. That was different. That was it."
Yep.
They didn't realize what had happened. The only people that knew was the staff and all of us. I mean, all of 128 of us, we knew what happened.
That was scary.
Yeah, color guard in 1985. Cheryl, you remember we had a new instructor, Wanda, who wrote all the work, and it was like nothing we've ever done before. And the amount of repetition, I mean, she had us wrapping poles around our bodies and doing weird neck roll stuff while walking backwards and, doing all this stuff. And I just remember how difficult it was. To say that is because everything you guys are talking about, I have no recollection of, because I think most of us in the Guard were so focused on trying to do it well because it was so different for us. It was a different way of spinning, of moving, and it was just very, very hard. And I'm sitting here listening to all your stories and I'm like, I don't remember that. That happened? I don't remember that.
We also had a big turnover.
We went like this. We had a glitch in finals. I don't remember any glitch.
Now that I do remember because I started out on the 0 yard line and we had a big turnover that year. And when they assigned spots, Peggy did basically assigned us each a person to keep our eyes on. So every other person was a veteran, a rookie, a veteran, a rookie, and it almost evened out. And on my side, some people started first, and then some people started that half count later. And I don't know, I can't remember who was a spot away from me, but the two of us were screaming and counting to get everybody back into where we needed
I vaguely remember having to count now that you say that. Yelling out
You
and
were all
counting.
screaming and counting.
I remember that.
Can we go back to Tom Smith and our very first set? Tom, where'd you start? In the tunnel?
That's actually a really good transition. That was going to be my next topic. So Tom, take it away. I have the video queued up if you want to walk us through it, but if you want to talk about it first, go ahead.
This is the prelims video, right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Okay. So this is not the final, the finals video. It was, go ahead and show it.
Okay, here we go. All right, so explain to our audience what they just saw.
So that year, I mean, we were all order out of chaos is how Jeremiah starts. You have the one voice out there, everybody's doing their own thing, and the voice speaks out and it brings all this chaos into order. Well, I happen to be the fastest chaotic piece of the puzzle. So I always started against the goalpost. And I would actually go towards the back of the field and come around, and I always had about the furthest distance to go. And Zingali, when we were actually at Janesville, and it was before prelims, and he comes out and he goes, "Hey, Tomato Smith, I got something for you." I'm like, "What do you want?" He goes, "I want you out of the stadium." I said, "What?" He goes, "Well, how far can you go?" I said, I can probably go about 105 yards if I had it all lined up. He goes, "I want you out of the stadium."
Oh my God.
I'm like, "Okay, whatever. You want me in the parking lot? Where do you want me?" It's like kind of like what we said before. They told us what they wanted us to do, and we all did it. So I'm like, "Okay, I'm good." So I go out the first night, and the first night, I think it was 23 counts maybe for everything to come together. And I went out the first night, and when I came in, I actually had to slow. That was the prelims tape. I actually had to slow down because I would have got there too soon. So the next night I went out, and everybody was waiting for me. I had people in the entranceway. There were people in the stands. They were screaming down at me and everything else. And I'm a Garfield cadet. I don't break for anything. So literally I went out there, and Tony, Ricky, and I would always play the Jetsons. Da 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 da. That would be my warm up. So I went out there. I wailed the Jetsons in the tunnel, which was pretty cool because it echoed throughout the stadium underneath there. And then I went to parade rest, and I started praying. And I'm like, "Dear God, just let me know when to go." And it was kind of amazing, because I'm sitting there, everything starts, and typically I'd wait about 9 beats and then go. And I sat there, and it got to 9, and then it got to 10, and I got people around me screaming at me, "You gotta go, you're not gonna make it." I've got the fans yelling at me, "You are not gonna get there." And 11 comes, and 11 goes, and 12 comes, and all of a sudden I knew it's time. And I went, and that night I actually hit right. I mean, I didn't slow down. It was all the way in. And Neil Singlob told me, he goes, "Well, we knew when you came in the stadium, because it sounded like an airplane came, because all of a sudden he was up front somewhere. He goes, we could see the entire crowd kind of stand up from one side to the other. And on that GE tape that I had, the judge is on there going, he's not going to make it. He's not going to make it. He's not going to, I can't believe he made it. So that was my Zingali. And after the show, we win, and Zingali comes down, and it was funny. Michael Klesch, I was a third soprano. Michael Klesch always tried to, Tom, you need, man, I've got you in this. I want you up at second this year. I'm like, nah, Michael, my gig is marching, man. I'm out here. And it was funny. Zingali in '84 told me, he goes, man, if Tom Smith went to get a hot dog, the whole corps would go get a hot dog, because all the sets were based off of where I was out there in that corner a lot of times. So that night at finals, Zingali comes down. He comes right to me, and he goes, you're the only person I ever know. He goes, you got a standing ovation from 50,000 people for marching. He goes, and I was like, well, that was pretty cool, but I sure still don't know what happened with the beginning of CANDIDE. That was a fun night. And let me say one other thing while I'm talking to the Drumline. Dude, in my book, you were the heat. I mean, there was nobody better in my eyes than you guys. And that's from my heart. So,
Tom, one thing I wanted to talk to you about your run onto the field. So, the victory run through, I heard rumors that you're out in the parking lot. Is that true?
that was not true. I was actually even further out. I was actually up on the concourse. You know, I wasn't even on the ramp. I was up in the concourse, and nobody followed me to get a hot dog up there. So I don't know what this guy was talking about. Anyway, I was up there by the concession stands when I started that night. So
We heard rumors that some of the guys from the Cavaliers were trying to hassle you.
but here's the deal. I am one of those 11-year marching guys. I marched with the Queen City Cadets. I marched with the Pride of Cincinnati. And then I came to Garfield. Once I saw the 82 show, dude, I was sold. I'm like, I'm in. And one of the girls that I marched with at Pride of Cincinnati was actually she worked for DCI for years and years. When I met her and she came out before we went on, and I'm like, hey, I need you to help me. Can you go? She was down there making sure nobody passed in front of me because the track, I came down the ramp, through the fence, across the track, onto the field, and then all of that. And she basically kept everybody out of the way just so I wouldn't come flying down there at the speed of heat and then plow into somebody at 12 miles an hour. That would have been no good. So
I have this aerial shot of Camp Randall. Can you see my screen?
I can.
So where were you? Like, you're out here?
That's somewhere? The tunnel. That is the tunnel right there.
Okay.
So, and I was up. So I was at the very top of that tunnel, and I was only at the very top of that tunnel because I had to see Rich. I had to see when everything started. I had to be able to see him to know when to start counting. So I could see him, and then I saw the movement. But as soon as he moved and Jim started playing, that's when I started counting and praying and trying to make sure I left at the right time.
And what's amazing is, I don't think you were the only one that was out there. Like, I'm looking at the video and there's other people up here in the stands.
Yeah, that was a Camp Randall Stadium. Mark Hart was somewhere in the front, like in the stands in the front.
Yeah.
Oh, somewhere up here.
They moved him. He moved into the front up there. They moved me out of the stadium. Singali walked in and goes, "Okay, we're just going to make this completely crazy. Go to these places. Make sure you get there."
Mm-hmm.
And literally, when we did it in prelims, I had no idea. It was one of those things. Talking to Tommy Aungst, talking about, hey, you don't ever do anything, right when you can't repeat it. And I'm like, okay, well, it was kind of how it was that night. I walked out there. I'm like, I really have no clue how far I am out here. So a lot of it was based off of adrenaline.
Eric, when we learned that, we learned it at the Piermont Hilton. When we first learned it, if I remember correctly, the horn line was in a company front, kind of like on a 45, and it kind of rotated to the 50 during all of that and then hit. And that was Michael Cesario's idea, if I remember it correctly. And he went away, and George had always wanted to do that kind of crazy thing, and they did it. And Michael came back to the rehearsal and just he lost it. He was like, what the hell is that? That's not what we discussed. But I say that to say he bought into it. And then it started to get really crazy. Everybody was all over the place.
All right. I want to kind of wrap up 85. So DCI World Championships. You guys finished first highest score in drum corps history at the time, 98.4. I know we spoke about this before about, being humble, but again, what were your thoughts in terms of doing 3 in a row at that point? Never been done before in DCI history. So what were your thoughts about being crowned world champions again?
I think one of the things to keep in mind is that we won 3 years in a row with 3 different shows, which at that time was unheard of. Everybody always kept something from the previous year. So to do it 3 years in a row and with 3 different shows that was just ridiculous.
See, the thing that I credit with that summer, and this goes to you, Rich Armstrong, the staff let us do what we needed to do. And I found as a veteran at that point that we did a lot of cleaning ourselves. We did a lot of the positioning, the horns, getting into and out of formation, when you turned on what count. We did a lot of that. And Rich standing on the podium was conducting the drill cleaning that we were doing ourselves on the field. So I think that as a group, we had a very strong work ethic. We all helped everybody. And I thought that Rich did a great job as our conductor on the podium, the entire show. I thought that you did a great job that summer at helping us clean. So I felt that that was a very strong point that we had.
Well, Rich threw us off the field one time. It was Durham, South Carolina, I believe. We did not have our shit together at rehearsal. He turned around. He says, "Why don't you all get your shit together? We'll get something done while you do." And we did. We left and came up with a different plan. Came back.
My experience was Donnie Van Doren standing behind me asking the question why, and the whole 2 years was why. Why are they moving? Why are their horns not up? And if I remember, most people don't know this, but in 85 and even 84 and 83, because so many of the kids moved in to these places and hung out, the drum line always practiced during the day. They always were tracking. They were always working during the day, and the horns would sleep in and play basketball, and we wouldn't do anything, and the guard wouldn't do anything. And all of a sudden, those 3 years, you started seeing the horn line. Like in 85, we tracked in that little circle right in front of that school. And if we had not tracked, I don't think we'd have been able to pull off. It's all that extra practice. And if you remember, your third baritones, your third sopranos, and your second mellophones, a lot of those were woodwind players that wanted to be in a drum corps. They weren't all brass players. And so there was a lot of people teaching each other. And it was just a constant awareness of where we needed to be. And we didn't have, like you look at the staffs of drum corps today, oh my God, we didn't have that. We didn't have a person in front of every section of the horn line, or we didn't even have a ton of percussion staff or guard staff. So we had people teaching each other. And I don't think we would have done it without that teaching of each other. There are many times Shorty was the only person and Michael were the only two people standing behind the brass telling us what to do. And I think that's also how we got to where we got.
Well, you warmed them up, Rich. You did the warm up and technique thing. Michael and I would just show up and you had them all ready to go.
Well, that line was, I think we aged out 75% of the 1985 core. We're 21 year, 75% aged out that year. That's how old they were. You had some veterans that knew what they needed to do.
Hey, that's how young we were.
I had two really great different memories from the end of that year. One was, I think it was Minneapolis, St. Paul. Like we rehearsed in some stadium up there before finals. Is my memory of that correct? There's like a big wooden stadium up there. We did a run of Jeremiah with the horn line by itself on the hands of Rich. And Linda Hannum recorded that. And it's one of the most flawless things to this day that I think I have ever heard. And that tape somehow got itself out of my hands and into the cadets' hands. And there was a long time where they would play that on the horn bus and they would hand it down to the next year, to the next year. I finally did get it back like a few years ago. Someone did give it to me, but they were so good. That horn line was so incredibly good. And the other one was at finals, like to the testament of not worrying about the winning being everything, but just doing your job. I remember the end of that show. I remember going to see Rich Armstrong after that show was done. And then I left the stadium because Jim Prime was outside the stadium at a McDonald's behind the stadium. And I sat down there with him and we ate cheeseburgers and we talked and kind of like reflected on the season. And then we went out in the alley behind the stadium, me and him, to listen to the scores. And then when they announced Garfield in first place, we danced back there like two little kids. It was incredible. But that's like, you know, whether we won or lost, or was like, we knew it was an incredible year, like just an incredible year. And that was the thing that was the most important.
All right. Thank you, everyone. We're way past time. I just want to move on to final thoughts. If we can go around the virtual room just real quickly, try not to go into a 10-minute speech. How about we start off with Cheryl, just your final thoughts about your experience with the cadets, the three-peat years and being part of something very special.
The people that made it special, the people that we marched with, the people that we stood next to, the people that we didn't eat with, the people that, you know, we traveled with, we shared our lives with for however many days on tour. I just knew where I was going to be every November. So being a cadet was my life. And I love and respect everybody. And I love seeing the success of all the people we march with and everything that they're doing and continue to do in the activity, because that makes me so proud, because we all learn together from the same people. And I believe that we were taught how to teach, and we received the knowledge from some of the best in the industry, and we carry that on and share it with everybody and anybody we can.
It's great. Anne, how about yourself?
Similar to Cheryl, definitely the people, you know, everybody on this call, you know, you don't see us for years and years and decades, and it's like we just saw each other yesterday. That'll never change. For me, probably the growth between the 3 years, the maturity and the knowledge of what I learned. I mean, those 3 years, there was a tremendous amount of knowledge that was imparted to us. We may not have recognized it right at the time while we were in it, but when you look back, the amount of knowledge just on drill and, you know, what does it mean to be in an ensemble, even from a guard perspective? Peggy Twiggs was huge on ensemble. Like, you got to get out there with the drum line. You got to get out there with the horn line. You got to sing, 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 sing. We were required to sing every practice. And just all of those things that you learn will just unforgettable. And it really translated into my post-drum corps years, how I conducted my life, how I raised my family. It's just something that you just don't forget. And so it's been a privilege, actually, to march and be with the people on this call. It was an absolute privilege.
Chris Noble.
Wow. I came into the Garfield Cadets a rookie to drum corps, a rookie to the cadets, just oblivious. What I learned there was work ethic, the ties that bind, the brotherhood. And those things are the things that helped me with a 40-year career in cooking. You know, I've been blessed to do the things that I've been able to do because of the work ethic that was instilled in me being a cadet. Honestly, I'm not the greatest chef in the world. I've been blessed to work with some great chefs. I've been blessed to do some great things, but it's the work ethic that I learned by being a cadet that got me to where it was. It wasn't my talent. It was my grit. It was my hard work. It was woodshedding something, breaking things down, making mistakes, and moving forward. I didn't learn that anywhere else, but we're in that maroon and gold. So to all of those that Cheryl and Tom and all those people that marched 70s, 80s, you know, I can't thank you guys enough, because I was just one of those bando dimwits that walked in to what you guys helped create, and was lucky enough to have a decent enough tone as a one-year trombone player. Really, I mean, I had 1 year as a trombone. I was still writing fingerings down for trombone, and then they said, "Oh, you got to learn treble clef. Figure this out." Okay, 0, 1, 2, B. I didn't know what notes I was playing. I just listened and made sure I was playing the same notes as the other person. But I could march. And I'm so grateful I could, because if I couldn't, I don't think I would have made the line. I wouldn't have had the experience I had. So I thank everybody that came before me, and I thank all those after for keeping it alive.
Thank you, Chris. Tom Smith.
The people. It really comes down to each and every one of us. I mean, I just can't say enough about it. I love every single one of you. I mean, it's one of those things, talk about a band of brothers and sisters. We went out there with one thing in mind, each one of us, to be the best that we could be individually. And night after night and day after day, we'd work through the things we had to work through. And we were always striving for excellence. And it was just Anne mentioned it, the privilege. It was an honor to be out there with you guys. And I mean, I just absolutely loved it. I got to spend some time in the Air Force after that. And core values for the Air Force, one of them, excellence in all we do. Well, the funny thing is, it's awful easy, because guess what? That was really our core value with the Garfield Cadets. Excellence in everything we did, whether it was marching, whether it was playing, whether it was relating to each other. Every night we went out there, we tried to be the best that we could be, period. So I just want to thank you guys and let you know that you haven't heard from me in years and years, because I've been all over the place, but you've never been out of my mind and you've never been out of my heart. And I love all of you guys.
Thank you, Tom Smith. Tom Aungst.
Yeah, well, it's kind of cool to hear different stories from people who haven't, seen it a long time. Being part of the Corps for 34 years, and I just realized that tonight when I started adding up the years. When I came in 81, it was just kind of cool. I was just thinking back then, it was like, wow, I'm getting a chance to march a junior corps. I think my favorite time in drum corps for me was 81, because it was my first experience in DCI and all that. And the corps was 7th, right? And then, who would have figured that, 2 years later the corps would win, then they win another one, then they win another one. And then the Corps, over the course of, 3 decades would compete for, 10 championships and whatever. I guess honored and blessed to be part of that. I went to Westchester not to be a band director. I was like, there's no way I'm going to be a band director, because I saw my band director and I'm like, I'm not doing that. And I went there because I was like, oh, if I do music education, I'll have my summers off to do drum corps. But I've been a band director here at Dartmouth for 32 years, so I don't know. But, my whole plan was to learn and do the activity. So I've been very blessed and fortunate to be part of, the Three-peat and Mr. Klesch and everyone, here. And, it's cool. It's cool to listen to people's stories. And, at 61 years old, I mean, wow. I mean, I was, 18 when I started, aged out when you're 21 and I'm 61. It just seems like yesterday, but when you count the years, it wasn't yesterday. It's a long time ago. So it's cool to see everyone, and I'm glad that I was able to get on here. I wasn't sure if I really wanted to, go back and do all that. Like for me, sometimes it's kind of moving forward but this is cool. I'm glad I did this. So thank you for inviting me, Eric.
No, you're welcome. Yeah, thank you for joining. Yeah, you said a couple things that resonated with myself. Like your first year was 81, and that really had significance to you. My rookie year was 1989, and I think we finished 5th place that year. Following year, 1990, where we won DCI championships. But I look back on my time and my experience and the hardships that I experienced and the perseverance, the hard work, the all the words that we said throughout this entire discussion, rang true to me. I wasn't the most talented player, but I pushed through it. And I look back on my 2 years that I marched, and even though we won in 90, 89 has a lot of more significance to me. Not to take away what we did in 90, but just personally for me, it just meant a lot more. Michael Jones, how about yourself? What are your final thoughts on the three-peat and your experience as a cadet?
I hated all of that rehearsal. I didn't need to rehearse that much. Maybe the Corps did, but I didn't need all of that rehearsal. No, but I want to say initially that Tom Aungst, you started teaching very young, but you were a very gifted teacher. And I know that because I incorporate a lot of the tactics. There were a lot of days I wanted to beat you up, Tom Aungst, but a lot of the tactics and a lot of the...
I can still kick your butt at 61 years old. Bring it.
Oh, really? Okay, let's go.
No, I'm not sure if I could.
But
I'm stuck in my chair.
a lot of the
Tell me when, I will be there.
A lot of the teaching methods I incorporate today, I teach middle school. But in terms of my experience with the Corps, I reflect on it like, I attended the greatest music conservatory and visual arts design school for 6 years for $500. I don't know where you can go in America and get that kind of education being taught by all of these masters, Michael Cesario, Tom Hannum, all of them. And it was a great experience. And it's one that I watch 87. I must watch it about three times a day, every day. I'm proud to be a cadet. And there was a point where I stopped saying I'm in the cadets to I am a cadet. So thanks.
Thank you, Michael. Rich Armstrong.
Wow, I don't even know where to begin. But I'll talk about 1981 with Tom, because I remember we used to walk down to some college where there was a basketball court, because Tom was a really good basketball player. And there was something about playing basketball with him. And it happened all the way until I aged out. As long as the staff would play basketball, and in beginning, there was an aggressiveness to Tom, and it's like he took it out in basketball, and you had to learn to take him, because he would hit you hard, and he would come at you hard, and there was that competitiveness, and I liked that, and I liked that aggressiveness, and the Corps had that. It had that grit. I teach band, and all three of my children have received the discipline that the cadets have shared with me. And I just felt that I was lucky to be in the right place at the right time. That the people that we got to work with, the people that we learned with from were at the time, they didn't know what they were doing. And I don't say that in a negative way. They didn't know they were going to make history. They were doing what they creatively thought they needed to do at the time. And, I think about watching Drum Corps this summer. I can't wait to see what's going to happen, and to know that you wouldn't have today without what happened in those 3 years. You wouldn't have those people making those changes and deciding to chop the field up, chop the drum line up, and create. I'm still asking, why didn't we use a Dr. Beat and a Long Ranger in the back of the field back in 83, 84, and 85, like drum corps are using today? Our time would have been better. And they had those. I'm just like, what happened? But it's the people. And every show was made to be important. The performances were made to be important, and I don't know. It's hard to put into words what I got out of that, because there's so much that we get out of it. I mean, I wouldn't have the success I have now without that success. I wouldn't have it, and so I feel very blessed. I mean, I just that's all I can say. It's hard to put it in words.
Thanks, Rich. Shorty.
Yeah, I'm listening to everybody else, and it's, it takes me back. Certainly all the people that were involved with all of that were incredible. But as I'm sitting here thinking, and what Rich just said about those 3 years informing the next 40, I think that rings very, very true, because I went on to, I spent those years with the cadets, but I went on to teach the troopers, the crossmen, and I was with Jersey Surf forever. And the techniques that we developed to put the ensemble together, and, the overall philosophy of how that worked, of putting your feet with your source of tempo, which may be something you see or maybe something you listen to, that's something that still is out there today. And we figured that out based upon what we needed to do in order to make those shows come alive. And I think the other thing for me that I always come back to is those three years produced so many movers and shakers of the activity. If you look and see who's still doing the things, I'll miss somebody, so I'm not even going to start to name them. But the best example is in 1990, all of the people that were in charge of sections and arranging and things with the cadets were all the techs during the Three-peat. And when we got to 90, I had the great honor of working with Michael Klesch in his first year, and the privilege of us doing it in 90, where we only had like 3 brass staff, him, me, and Linda. And that was it. But you also had Mark Sylvester was now writing the drill. Tom was writing the book, the drum book. April was in charge of the color guard now. So it was all of those people who had come through that 3-year period who were now giving it back into the drum corps, and that continued right up until last year, where the corps found a way to create its own next generations, each one of them. And I think that's what contributed to the success so much, because once you have been in that circle and put your hand on the shoulder of your neighbor and sung that song, that'll stay with you forever. So I thank you for inviting me to this. This was awesome. Love all of you.
Thank you very much, Shorty. Kathy.
I have been asked which of the 3 years that I marched were my favorite. I cannot give you a straight answer. Each one of them has their own merit, good, bad, and otherwise. I wouldn't trade any second of any of them for anything. I feel so blessed to have marched with everyone. The staff was amazing. Humans, they were not above us. They were our friend, but we knew where the line was in the sand and how we had to respect them, except for Shorty, who fought me all the time about doing push-ups. But we knew we could party with the staff, but we also respected the staff. And those that we marched with or marched for that went on to do other greater things, you guys are awesome. Including those that have gone on to be band directors and teachers and, military and everything else. I have total respect and love and admiration for every single one of you. Again, and Eric, thank you so much for putting this together. I'm grateful to be part of it. And I just, I can't put into words what I can take away from everything, but I just love all you guys so much. And, for holy name shall always be. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Dawn, how about final thoughts from yourself?
Oh gosh. I was so young coming in. I was 11. Seriously, I was 11. Somewhere between 6th grade and 7th grade. I think the only other person maybe as young as I was Stephen Allman, everyone who went by Kid. Is that correct? Those of you who remembered him? Cadets. They've always taught you to be the best that you can be. And that has translated into my entire life. Everything. From, you know, that even goes down to my kids. If it ain't bleeding, ain't broken, I don't want to hear it, right? It's be the best that you can be. So you have 81, 82, 83, 84, 85. And 83, 84, and 85, I think if you would have asked me, you know, my favorite years, I probably would have said 83 because it's the first. Moving forward, I had the blessings of marching 1990, my age out year. And to my surprise, I came in that year and I came into November camp and Tom Aungst just looked at me because, you know, he knew I was young. And he's like, "Are you back?" And I said, "I'm here." And he's like, "Good." And I just remember we just had that look, short communication, and that's all we had. And he was like, "Awesome." So he knew whatever happened that year, which Tom, I mean, I don't know if you remember Tom, but our number 3 cymbal player mid-season ended up tearing his ACL. And so we pulled in an alternate horn player mid-season, beginning of July, to learn how to play cymbals, much less how to march a show. And he asked me, and he's just like, "What do you think? Can we do this, or do we need to cut down to 4? And I just looked at him, I said, "I got this." And he had 100% trust in me, and he just said, "Okay." And so I spent the next 4 weeks teaching a horn player how to play cymbals, much less to make the 1990 show work. But what was so incredible about the 1990 show was, for me, it was a reprieve of 83, 84, 85. So I could not have aged out at a better year, because I took the 3 most best years of my life, and that was my age out year. So we went in there in November, December learning music, and I would just hear the snare drummers and not even having heard it, right? CANDIDE. I hadn't heard it in 5 years, but immediately I went up and I'm like, do, 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 da, 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 and I immediately started playing it. And all the other cymbal players were like, "How do you know this? What's going on?" And I'm like, "You just know." And so for me, having that, once upon a time, I would have said 83 was my best year, but 1990, having the trust from Tom Aungst, knowing the staff already really intimately, and then doing a reprise of 83, 84, and 85, that was the best gift I could have ever been given. And I love you guys. And I'm already crying.
Thanks, Dawn. And Michael Klesch, final thoughts.
Jesus, part of me wants to say what they said, because you've all said such incredible things. I'm grateful for doing this kind of thing, because I struggle at times to like really specifically remember things from back then. I wish I had more pictures. I wish I had more memories. I wish I had more things to do that. And when I sit here and I listen to you tell these stories and these events, it brings so many things back that are just so very cool. So I'm appreciative of that. You know, the best part of being through all that time was the people, hands down, like you've all said. You know, and I was a member, and I taught, and I did different things. I'm sure I did great things. I'm sure I did a lot of things that pissed you all off. There's all that stuff that's in between. But you know, for me, it was always the people were the best thing, you know. And the last thing were all the lessons that you learned there. You know, it still sticks with me today, like the do your best thing, like a number of you have said. And, you know, I find that as I've gone through my life, there are things that you're proud of, there are things that you're not proud of, but, you know, this heritage led me to always try to find the next best version of me and what I do. And I have drum corps to thank for that. You know, it was a turning point in my life, certainly. Like, I came in there, this little band nerd from Western Pennsylvania, you know, by these badass people from Garfield, New Jersey, that welcomed me in there, you know, for why I have no idea, but I'm incredibly fortunate that they did. And I learned things and I experienced things that, you know, led me to something that I could love for the rest of my life. So it's grateful. It's feeling blessed. It's being grateful. You know, and thank you for the people on here that I've, you know, been fortunate enough to spend that time with. Just thank you for that, because it's not gone unnoticed, and it's not, you know, I'm very thankful for it.
Paul Herzog, as a co-host, thank you for helping me out with this entire panel interview, especially on the technical side of things and preparation and to the lead up to this. What about yourself? Any final thoughts about being part of this panel?
So I'm so grateful for you asking me to help out with this, Eric. And we go way back through this drum corps thing. I mentioned it a little bit at the start with the first few people that were coming on, but I first wanted to do drum corps because I saw a video of the '84 PBS show, and specifically the first 4 corps that were on that night at finals. I went, oh, this is really cool. They're really good at this. And then Barbara started playing Maria and I was gone. And I marched, and then I got to be a cadet, and I found my people, and that saved my life. And you're all part of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, thank you, everyone. I don't have any great way to wrap this up. We talked about a lot tonight. We talked about the embryonic stages leading up to the three-peat. Talked about the Garfield Cadet plebes. We talked about the kids that came from the South. We talked about the legendary 83, 84, and 85 shows, the three-peat. And yeah, I wanted to thank you all for taking the time to participate in this panel. I know we've gone way over time. I was kind of expecting this to happen, but yeah, I want to thank you all for taking the time out of your evening to contribute to this review about one of the most important moments in drum corps history. I was talking a little bit about, the coaching tree is making a metaphor analogy to, sports. And yeah, when I look at the early 80s and think about all the staff that came through there, Zingali and Peggy Twiggs, again, somebody said, they don't want to mention all the names because they're going to forget someone, but everyone that came out of the instructors, the staff back then, and then they imparted their knowledge onto everyone here. And you guys have all, moved on to great careers in DCI. And again, many of you are in the DCI Hall of Fame, especially also the Cadets Hall of Fame. So yeah, I have no great way to wrap this up, but I just want to say thank you for your participation in this panel interview. And to wrap things up, for holy name shall always be.